5 years after Eirik, you would think the silence of deep space would stop sounding like a man screaming. It didn't. Bastian Rogue sat in the jump seat of the dropship with his helmet in his lap and listened to nothing, and the nothing screamed the way it always did when there was time to think. Across from him, Tove was checking her sidearm for the 4th time. She didn't need to. She just liked the click of it, the way the magazine seated home with that small mechanical certainty, the way nothing else in their lives seated home anymore. She caught him watching and held the flask out without looking up. "It's cold," she said. "It's always cold." "That's the point of a flask, Rogue. You want warm, drink it on the ground." He took it. Norwegian aquavit, the bad kind, the kind that tasted like a barn door in a funeral. He took one swallow and passed it on. Dennis, who hadn't said a word since the briefing, took 2. Urban took none because Urban was 19 and still believed he would die clear-eyed. "To Eirik," Tove said, not because she meant it but because somebody had to. "To Eirik," they answered, and they meant it the way soldiers always mean a toast to a dead place, half curse, half prayer, the kind of words you say because the alternative is silence and silence has teeth. Eirik, the name still did things to Bastian's chest. Eirik had not been a man. Eirik had been a city, a human city on a human moon, the first one the Penusari had ever taken. 40,000 civilians, 2 infantry divisions. A children's hospital that Bastian had personally helped evacuate over the course of a long, cold, bad week before the orbital began. He had carried a girl out on his back, 6 years old. She had asked him, halfway down the stairwell, whether her cat would be okay. He had said yes. He had been lying. The cat had not been okay. The cat had been on the 7th floor, and the 7th floor was, by that point, on fire. The girl was alive. She lived in Trondheim now. She wrote him letters in big, careful handwriting at every Christmas, and signed them with her cat's name underneath her own, the way children do when they cannot bear that something is gone. That was Eirik. That was what they had toasted. "You good, Rogue?" Dennis asked. Dennis was not the kind of man who asked. Dennis was the kind of man who watched and waited and decided in private. If Dennis was asking, it meant Bastian's face had done something Bastian had not authorized it to do. "I'm good." "You sure?" "I'm good, Dennis." Dennis nodded once. The nod meant he didn't believe Bastian, and he wasn't going to push it, and if Bastian needed him later he would be there. The whole conversation took 2 seconds. That was Dennis. Bastian had walked through fire with this man, and they had spoken, in total, perhaps 400 words in 2 years, and none of them had ever needed to be said twice. Urban was watching them. Urban watched everyone, all the time, with the wide, unblinking attention of a kid who knew he was the youngest and was trying very hard not to be the weakest. His helmet was too big for him. They were all too big for him. He had come up through the academy in the 4 years after Eirik, in the boom years when the Republic was scared and the recruitment quotas were impossible and the standards had quietly dropped, and he had ended up here, on this drop, with 3 of the worst luckiest veterans the Republic still had on its books. Bastian liked him. Bastian liked him the way you like a stray dog. He hoped, in a way he would not admit to himself, that Urban would be smart enough to stay behind him. "First drop?" Bastian asked him. "Third." "What were the other 2? "Training." "Training doesn't count." "That's what everyone keeps telling me." "Listen to them." Urban tried to smile. It didn't quite reach his mouth. Outside the porthole, the planet rolled up toward them like a wound. They were calling it Penis 3 in the briefing because nobody had bothered with a better name. Atmosphere breathable, gravity within tolerance, surface temperature in the high single digits, 2 moons, 1 ocean, 1 enemy. The Penusari held it the way a fist holds a stone, and Command wanted to know how the fist was wired, so Command was sending 6 people down to look at it. 6 people and a stubborn old soldier named Bastian Rogue, who had survived Eirik and therefore could not, in the eyes of the brass, die. Bastian had stopped explaining to the brass that survival was not a renewable resource. The drop went the way drops go. The ship's belly opened and the cold hit them like an open hand, and then they were falling, and then they weren't, and then they were on a ridge of black glassy stone above a forest that didn't look like a forest, made of things that grew in spirals and held their breath when a person walked under them. Dennis took point. Urban took the rear. Tove walked in the middle with her med kit clipped to her hip and her flask in her thigh pocket. Bastian walked where he always walked, which was wherever the ground felt least sure under his boots. For 3 hours the planet pretended to be a planet, then it stopped pretending. The first sign was the smell. Not bad, that was the trouble. It smelled like a kitchen. Like bread, faintly, and like wet wool, and underneath those, like something his grandmother had cooked once in a copper pot in a house that had burned down before he turned 8. Bastian stopped walking. Tove walked into his shoulder blade and made a small sound. "What? You smell that?" "I smell forest." "You smell bread." She breathed in. Her face did the thing her face did when she was about to lie to him. "I smell forest, rogue." That was when the spiral trees moved. They didn't move the way trees move in wind. They moved the way an animal moves that has been still a long time and has decided all at once to be done with stillness. The forest unhinged itself. Branches that had been branches a moment ago became long pale arms with too many joints, and the joints all bent the wrong way at once, and the air filled with a sound that Bastian's brain refused to call language even though it clearly was language. Even though it was being spoken at them in tones that meant something, even though the something it meant was "you should not be here." Dennis raised his rifle. Dennis did not get to fire it. The thing that came out of the trees came out of 3 trees at once, as if the trees had been one thing pretending to be 3, and it took Dennis in the chest with a hand that had 7 fingers and put him down on the moss without any of the noise a person usually makes when they die. Urban screamed. Urban shouldn't have screamed because screaming meant breathing in, and breathing in meant the spore the 7-fingered thing had just released went into Urban's lungs, and 3 seconds later Urban was on his knees, and 4 seconds later Urban was on his face, and at 5 Urban wasn't anything at all. Tove fired, Bastian fired, the forest answered. There is no honest way to describe a firefight. You can describe the sound, the dry stutter of the rifles, the wet thump of the alien weapons, the small surprised noises people make when they discover they have been hit. You can describe the smell, the burnt copper smell of human blood and the strange sugared smell of whatever the Penusari bled. You can describe the way time stretches and then snaps back. But you cannot describe the shape of it, because a firefight does not have a shape. It has only an inside and an outside, and once you are inside it, there is no way to remember how you got there. What Bastian remembered afterward was Tove. Tove going down on her left knee because something in her right hip had stopped working. Tove still firing, calm as a Tuesday. Tove looking up at him with the expression of a woman about to ask for a favor she knew he could not refuse, and saying, very quietly, the way a person says it when they have already done the math, "Rogue, go." "No. Rogue." "Tove, go." She tossed him the flask. "Don't drink it warm." He went. He went because she told him to, and because Dennis was already dead, and because Urban was a shape on the moss, and because if he stayed there with her, he would die there with her and the mission would die with him, and the mission was the only thing he had left that resembled a reason. But before he went, he did one thing. He went back 3 steps, just 3. He went back to Tove and he knelt down beside her, and her hand was already cold where it gripped the rifle, and he put his hand over hers just for a second, and he said her full name out loud the way the priest said it at home, the way it had to be said so a person could leave properly. Tove Marin Lindqvist. He said it the way her mother would have said it. He said it because no one else was going to. Then he stood up, and he took the flask from her thigh pocket, because she would have wanted him to, and he turned, and he ran. He ran down the ridge with the spiral things screaming behind him in their language that was not language, and he did not look back, and he did not let himself listen for the moment her rifle stopped firing, and when it stopped firing anyway, he did not stop running. He ran until the forest ended. The forest ended at a cliff. Below the cliff was a valley. In the valley was a city, except city was the wrong word, because cities are built and this had grown. It rose out of the ground in the same spirals as the trees, only larger and shining, and full of small lights that moved the way blood moves through a body. He lay flat at the cliff's edge and watched the lights move, and his lungs hurt, and his hands shook, and somewhere behind him the forest was finishing whatever it had started with Tove, and Bastian Rogue, veteran of the Iric campaign, decorated for valor, two-time recipient of the Cross of the Republic, lay on his stomach on an alien cliff and cried without making any noise about it, the way men cry when they have learned how. Then he wiped his face on his sleeve, because that was what came next. He found a way down, because there was always a way down. The cliff broke into a long sloping scree of black glass, and he half walked and half slid it, and at the bottom he found a stream, and he followed the stream because water on any planet eventually goes somewhere, and the somewhere it went was a low arch in the side of the spiral city where the workers must have brought water in, once, in the old days before the city learned to feed itself. He went in. Inside the city was warm. That was the first wrong thing. The second was the smell, bread again and wet wool and his grandmother's copper pot, and now a fourth thing, a thing like the back of a child's neck after a bath. The corridors were not corridors. They were arteries. They pulsed, very slowly, with a rhythm that did not match his own. He walked with his rifle low and his free hand against the wall, because the wall was warm, and the warm was the only thing in the whole city that felt like a thing he could trust. He walked for a long time. He had been told in the briefing that the Penusari were a hive species. That was the word Command had used. Hive. He had pictured insects. Everyone pictured insects. Hive meant ants, meant bees, meant the bad old documentary footage of things crawling over each other in the dark. What he found when the artery he was walking down widened into a chamber was not insects. It was a room full of people. They weren't people. He knew they weren't people. They were tall and pale and had too many fingers, and their faces were not faces in any sense his brain wanted to accept. But they were standing in a room together, and they were doing the things people do in rooms together. Two of them were carrying a long woven object between them. One of them was bent over what might have been a child, fixing something at the child's collar. One of them was laughing. He was sure of that one. The sound was not a human laugh, but the shape of it, the rhythm, the way it cut off short at the end, the way laughter does when something brief and good has just happened, that was laughter. That was laughter in any language. He stood in the mouth of the artery and watched them, and none of them saw him, and for the first time since the dropship he understood in the bottom of his stomach what he had walked into. These were not the enemy, these were a town. He watched the one bent over the child a little longer than he should have. The adult, if adult was the right word, if anything was the right word, had its head tilted at an angle that human heads tilted at when they were listening to something small and beloved. The child held up its hand. Its hand had only 6 fingers, not the full 8. He understood somehow, without being told, that the missing 2 would grow later, that this was a young one, an unfinished one, a being still arriving. The adult took the 6-fingered hand in its own 8-fingered one and pressed the small pads against its own pads, finger to finger, and the child made a sound. He heard the sound. The sound was small and high and pleased. The sound had no human word inside it, but his chest knew it anyway. His chest knew that sound in every language his chest had ever been spoken to in. He thought of the girl from Iric, the one he had carried out, the one who wrote him letters. He thought, Fiend, oh Fiend, what have we been doing? Command had told them, military targets. Command had told them, this is a war world. Command had told them, The Penusari are an aggressive expansionist hive species, and the population centers we have identified are barracks and breeding pits. Command had told them many things, and Command had not, it now seemed, been entirely accurate, because nobody was breeding anything in this room. They were carrying things. They were laughing. They were bent over their children. Bastian backed out of the artery very slowly. His rifle was still up. His finger had moved off the trigger without his permission. He backed, and the corridor curved, and he could not see the room anymore. And he put his shoulder against the warm, pulsing wall, and he closed his eyes, and he said, out loud in Norwegian, the word his mother had used when he was a boy, and something he had built had broken. Fiend. That was when he heard the scream. It was not a Penusari scream. He had heard those up on the ridge, and they were a sound a human throat could not make. This one had the shape his own throat would have made if his throat had been screaming. High and ragged and furious. Female. Hurt. He should have walked the other way. The mission was reconnaissance. The mission was get in, see, get out, report. The mission did not include screams. He had failed the mission already in 7 different ways and was about to fail it in an 8th, and he knew it, and he went toward the scream anyway, because that was the thing inside Bastian Rogue that had never learned to sit down when it was told. The corridor wound. The scream came again. He broke into a run. The artery opened into a hall that had not grown but been built, the only built thing he had seen since he came in. Stone, real stone, cut the way humans cut stone, square and patient. At the center of the hall was a low platform, and on the platform was a woman. He thought woman because his brain insisted. She was Penusari, tall, too many-fingered, pale. But she was wearing something across her shoulders that was unmistakably a robe, and around her brow she wore a thin band of metal, and on the platform she was kneeling, and standing over her was another Penusari, taller, broader, with a face that was wrong even by the standards of the species he had just learned existed. The standing one was smiling. The Penusari face was not built for smiling. The mouth was in the wrong place and the wrong shape, and what it was doing now, the way it had pulled itself up at one corner and not the other, the way the eyes above it had not joined in, was the worst thing Bastian had seen in 5 years, and he had seen Eirik, and that was saying something. Yeah, he muttered under his breath in English to nobody. That's a cringe-ass smile, my dude. The standing one raised an arm. In the arm was an instrument Bastian did not recognize but understood immediately, the way you understand a knife the first time you see one. The kneeling one looked up. The kneeling one's eyes, and he could call them eyes, even though they had 3 lids and the lids closed sideways. The kneeling one's eyes met his across the hall. She saw him. She knew he saw her. She did not call out. She did not flinch. She just looked at him the way a person looks at you when they have decided that whatever happens next is no longer in their hands and is now in yours. Bastian raised the rifle. The hall was 40 meters across. The standing one had not heard him come in. The kneeling one had not given him away. The rifle was a good rifle, the same rifle he had carried through Eirik, and he had not missed a 40-meter shot since he was 23 years old, and even then he had only missed because a girl named Liv had been watching, and he had wanted to look brave by being casual. He was not casual now. He fired 3 rounds. The first took the standing one in what would have been a human's shoulder. The second went wide because the standing one was already moving. The third hit the wall behind the platform and threw stone splinters across the kneeling one's face, and she still did not flinch. She only watched him, and Bastian was running now, across the hall, rifle up, and the standing one had turned and was bringing the instrument around, and the instrument made a sound like a held breath letting go, and Bastian felt something open along his left side, from his hip to his ribs, the way a zipper opens, and he kept running. Because if he stopped now, he was dead, and so was she. He got to the platform. He fired again. This time he didn't miss. The standing one went down wrong, the limbs folding the wrong way, the knot smile still on the knot face. and Bastion put one more round into the place where its head almost was, and then he was on his knees next to the kneeling one, because his left leg had decided it was finished, and he was looking up at her, and she was looking down at him, and his side was opening, and he could feel the warmth running down inside his suit, and he could smell, very clearly now, the bread and the wool, and the copper pot of his grandmother's kitchen. "Hey," he said, in English, because that was the only language he had left in him. "Hey, you okay?" She did not answer. She reached down. Her hands, and she had 8 fingers, 4 to a side, and each one ended in a small flat pad. Her hands came toward his face, and he did not flinch, because he could not have flinched if he had wanted to. She touched his cheek with 2 of the pads. Then she touched the wound at his side. Then she touched her own brow under the metal band, and she made a sound. It was not a word. It was a low, continuous note, and it went on for several seconds, and somewhere very far away in the city, something answered. Then she did the thing that later would be told and retold in every language humans spoke, and every language the Penusari spoke after the Penusari learned, again, how to speak as individuals. She took the metal band off her brow. She took it off slowly with both hands, and she set it on the stone of the platform beside his hip, and she looked at him with her 3-lidded eyes, and then she lay down beside him, on the platform, on the stone, with her body between him and the door. Bastion, dying, said, "What are you doing?" She made the low note again. A long time later, he would learn later that it was 11 minutes, that the city's hive mind took 11 minutes to fully process what she had just done. The city began to scream. It was not a sound, not exactly. It was a pressure. It pushed against the inside of his skull the way deep water pushes against the inside of a hull. He understood, without being told, that the entire city was reacting to what she had done, that every Penusari in the spiral was at this moment learning what their queen had just learned, and that none of them had words for it, because none of them had needed words for anything in a very long time. She lay there. She did not move. The pressure grew and grew, and Bastion's vision narrowed, and the warm wet at his side became cold wet, and he thought, this is it. This is the end of Bastion Rogue, on a stone slab in an alien city next to an alien queen who I will never understand, and who has done something for me I will never understand. And the last thing my brain will ever process is that her hand is on mine, and her hand is very warm. He did not die. He woke up in a room he did not recognize, in a bed that was not a bed, with 8 tubes in his arm and a Penusari standing over him whose face was so still he could not tell at first whether it was a living thing or a statue. The Penusari saw him open his eyes. The Penusari turned and left the room without making a sound. Some time later, minutes, hours, he could not tell, the queen came in. He knew her at once, not by her face, which his brain still could not hold steady, but by the metal band which was back on her brow. She came to the side of the knot-bed, and she stood there a long time without speaking. Then she put one pad of one finger on the back of his hand. "You saved me," she said. In English. In English, with an accent he could not place. An accent that was no accent at all, because no human had ever made the sound she was making. But in English, perfectly grammatical English, the kind of English his mother had spoken. "How?" he said, because he was not capable in that moment of anything more. "We listen," she said. "We have listened to your kind for 40 of your years. We did not know we were listening. We thought we were studying. We were wrong." He turned his head. It hurt. "Where am I?" "In my chamber. You are healing. The wound was deep, but not deeper than our medicine." "Why am I in your chamber?" She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Because if you were anywhere else they would kill you." My people. Your people." "My people are confused," she said. "My people have not been confused in a very long time. They do not know what to do with a confused thing. They will kill it if I let them. I am not going to let them." He closed his eyes. Why, he said, why aren't you letting them? Because you saved me. That's not a reason. It is the only reason, she said. It is the reason that broke us. We did not know it was possible. He opened his eyes again. She was looking at him. 3 eyelids, 3 of them slow and patient as snow. Lady, he said, and his voice cracked, we have been killing each other for 40 of my years. There is a war on. There has been a war on since I was old enough to hold a rifle. I'm not anybody. I'm a scout. They sent 6 of us. 5 are dead. Why am I? Because you saved me, she said again, and she said it the way a person says something they have just learned the shape of, the way a child says a new word, and you had no reason to. And you did not know what I was, and you were dying, and you saved me anyway. She paused. The metal band on her brow caught the light. My people, she said, do not have a word for that. We had one. A long time ago, before, we were not always, she stopped. She seemed to be looking for the word. We were not always one. There were many of us once, each one different, each one alone. We chose the hive. We chose it because being alone was hard. We have been the hive for 1,000 of your years. We have been good at it. Until you, she said. Until a thing with 4 fingers and 1 voice walked into my hall and shot the one who was going to kill me because he could not stand to watch it happen. You had no order. You had no plan. You had no kin here. You had no reason. We saw it. The whole hive saw it through me. And the hive remembered. And now the hive is frightened. The hive has not been frightened in 1,000 years. The hive does not know what to do with itself. She looked away. Some of them, she said, want to kill you and forget what they saw. Some of them want to keep you and learn what you are. Some of them, a few, want to leave the hive, to be one, alone like you. That is not what I am. No. He thought of Tove, the flask Dennis, Urban. He thought of his sister back home in Bergen, the way she put both her hands flat on the table when she was angry, the way she had stood in the airport when he shipped out the first time, the way her mouth had moved. No, he said, we are not alone, we are each our own. We come together, we come apart, but each one of us, yes, each one of us is. Different, she said. Different, yes. She nodded. He had not known the Penusari could nod. Maybe she had learned it from the listening. Maybe she had learned it just now from him. It is dangerous, she said. What you are, it is contagious. What do you mean? I mean, she said, that they are coming for me now, the ones who were not in my hall, the ones who did not see. The ones who only felt the hive shake and did not know why. They are coming because something is wrong with the queen, and they will fix it the only way they know how. They will replace her. He sat up. Pain went through his left side like a wire. He bit it down. How long? They are at the inner gate. Perhaps an hour, perhaps less. Give me a rifle. You can barely stand. Give me a rifle. She did not give him a rifle. She gave him something better. She gave him her arm, and she helped him out of the bed that was not a bed, and she walked him to a balcony that overlooked the great spiral of the city, and she stood beside him there, and the light of the 2 moons came down on both of them, and below them in the streets and arteries and chambers the city moved like a body that had just woken from a dream it did not want to be awake from. I am going to do something, she said. I do not know if it will work. If it does not work, you will die here, and so will I, and the war will go on, and your people will lose, because we are very many and you are very few. If it does work, I do not know what comes after. I have not lived in an after. What are you going to do? I am going to sing, she said. Sing. The old song. The one we sang before the hive. We have not sung it in 1,000 years. We are not supposed to remember it. I remember it. I have always remembered it. I think every queen has remembered it, and we have all of us been afraid of it, and none of us have sung it. Why now? She turned and looked at him. Her 3-lidded eyes were wet. He had not known they could be wet. Because you came, she said, And you bled on my floor and you didn't run, and I am tired of being afraid." She lifted her chin. The metal band caught the light again, and then she opened her mouth, her wrong-shaped, wrong-placed Penusari mouth, and she sang. It was not a song the way humans understand song. There was no melody he could hum. There was no rhythm he could count. But there was a sound, a long unfolding sound, that began in her chest and rose up through her throat and went out across the city and across the spiral and across the valley and up into the two moons and beyond, and the city stopped. Just stopped. Every artery, every chamber, every workshop and corridor and dormitory and hall. The whole hive went still. And then, one by one, the lights in the spiral began to change. He did not know how to describe it later. The lights had been moving in one rhythm. Now they were moving in many. Where there had been one heartbeat, there were thousands, then tens of thousands, then more. Each light was a Penusari. Each Penusari was waking from the hive. Each one was remembering the thing the queen had remembered, the thing none of them had been allowed to remember for 1,000 years. They were remembering being alone. Some of them, he learned later, could not bear it. Some of them died in those minutes. Their hearts simply stopped because they had never beaten alone before and they did not know how. Most of them did not die. Most of them stood very still wherever they were and listened to the queen's song and slowly, slowly found their own voices inside it. The mob at the inner gate stopped. He could see them from the balcony, a knot of pale figures with weapons. They stopped and they stood, and one by one their weapons came down. Not all of them. Not at first. One of them, a tall one near the front, raised its weapon higher, and Bastian, beside the queen, raised his hand in front of her as if he could stop a shot from 40 stories down, which he could not, and the tall one took aim, and then the one next to the tall one turned and put a hand on the tall one's arm. Just a hand, just an arm, just one Penusari, newly alone, newly individual, newly themselves, looking at another one and shaking their head, and the Penusari head can shake, it turns out, when there is a self inside it that needs to say no. The tall one lowered the weapon. The queen sang on. She sang for a very long time. Bastian leaned against her shoulder because he could not stand by himself anymore, and she let him. And her shoulder was very warm, and the song went on, and the city changed, and somewhere in the middle of it Bastian Rogue, veteran of the Iric campaign, two-time recipient of the Cross of the Republic, the last man of his squad, Bastian Rogue cried again, the second time in 2 days, the second time in 5 years. He cried for Tove, who had thrown him the flask. He cried for Dennis, who had taken point. He cried for Urban, who had been 19 and had screamed. He cried because he had come here to scout a target, and instead he had stood on a balcony with an alien queen while her people learned to be people again. And he did not know what to do with that, because nothing in his training had prepared him for the possibility that the war could simply, in one breath, end. When the song finished, the queen was tired. She sank to her knees beside him, and he sank to his, and they knelt together on the warm stone of the balcony, and the city below them was a city of strangers now, of selves, of single voices, and the great hush of the song was being slowly replaced by something Bastian recognized very well. It was the murmur of a crowd. He laughed, he could not help it. "What?" she said. She was breathing hard. "They sound like a market," he said. "They sound like the market in Bergen on a Saturday morning. Everybody talking at once, nobody listening." She made a sound. He realized after a moment that she was laughing too. It was the same laugh he had heard in the room with the carried things and the children, the brief sharp cutoff, the rhythm of laughter in any language. "It is very loud," she said. "It will be loud for a while." "Is it always loud where you come from?" "Always." "And you bear it?" "We bear it, sometimes we love it, mostly we complain about it. That's also part of bearing it." She thought about that. "I think," she said, "we are going to need help." "With what?" with being many. He sat back on his heels, his side still hurt. The two moons were going down. The sky was beginning to do something that, on his planet, would have been called dawn. Lady, he said, we are very good at being many. We are also very bad at it. If you want help, we will give you help. We will give you a lot of bad advice. We will tell you stories about ourselves and we will get them wrong. We will sell you things you don't need. We will fall in love with you. We will fight wars over which of us gets to be your friend. We will be embarrassing. We will be small. We will sometimes, when it matters, surprise you. That's what we are. That's all we are. She put one pad of one finger on the back of his hand again. Bastion Rogue, she said. Yes. I am going to tell my people about you. Please don't. I am going to tell them that a man with 4 fingers walked into my hall when he should have been running, and he shot the one who was going to kill me, and he was hurt for it. And he asked me, the first thing he said to me, while he was bleeding on my floor, he asked me if I was okay. Lady, I am going to tell them that this is what you are, all of you. That underneath everything you do, every war you start, every stupid thing your governments do, every cruelty and every greed, there is this thing, this small thing that none of us had a word for because we had let ourselves forget. I am going to tell them that you remembered it for us. And that we owe you for it. You don't owe me anything. That, she said, is also part of the thing. The sky turned. The first moon was gone. The second was sinking. Below them the city of strangers began, very slowly, to do the things cities do in the morning. A door opened somewhere and stayed open. Someone, one specific someone, a single voice, called out to another someone, and another someone called back, and it was the first conversation between 2 single Penusari in 1,000 years, and neither of them knew it was historic, because neither of them remembered that it was supposed to be impossible. Bastion closed his eyes. I had a friend, he said. Her name was Tove. She died yesterday on a ridge in a forest. I left her there. I am sorry. She gave me a flask. Before she told me not to drink it warm. Did you drink it warm? I haven't drunk it at all yet. I lost it. I lost it in the river. I don't know when. He opened his eyes. The queen was looking at him, 3 eyelids slow. I'll find you another, she said. You don't have any. I will, she said. I will learn. We have a lot to learn. 3 days later, the first delegation came. Not from Earth. Earth did not yet know, would not know for another 14 days, until the signal Bastion sent from the Queen's chamber crawled across the dark and reached a relay buoy somewhere in the outer dark and was picked up by a duty officer who would later say, in interviews, that she thought at first it was a prank. The first delegation came from one of the other Penusari cities, a smaller spiral 200 kilometers to the south. They had felt the Queen's song. They had felt their own hive shudder. They had elected, of all things, a delegation. They had argued about whom to send. They had not done either of those things in 1,000 years. They came with their heads bowed and their too many fingers folded in front of them, and they asked. In halting English they had learned overnight from the Queen's open broadcast what to do next. The Queen asked Bastion. Bastion, who was sitting on the balcony in a chair the Queen's people had built for him, because they had observed that he kept trying to sit on things that were not chairs, said, "Take a vote." The delegation did not know what a vote was. He explained it. It took an hour. At the end of the hour, the delegation went back to their spiral and held the first vote in Penusari history. They voted on whether to keep voting. The vote was very close. It passed by 11 votes out of 140,000. Bastion, when he heard, laughed so hard his side reopened and the Queen's medics had to come and stitch him up again, and the Queen sat with him through the stitching, and she said, "Why are you laughing?" "Because 11 votes," he said. "Because 11 votes. I do not understand." "It's so human," he said. "It's the most human thing. It's a coin flip. A whole world, a coin flip." She thought about it. Is that, she said carefully, a good thing? Lady, he said, it is the only thing. In the second week, they brought him the body of the one he had shot in the hall. They explained, to know what to do with it. In the old hive there had been no question. The body would have been returned to the common store. Nothing was wasted, nothing was kept. But the body was the body of an individual now, an individual who had tried to kill the queen and failed and died in the trying. The new selves of the city did not know what to do with that. They had no rituals. They had thrown the old rituals away 1,000 years ago and built nothing to replace them, because the hive had not needed anything to replace them. Bastian, who had buried too many people on too many planets, told them about burial. He told them about the way humans dug holes in the ground and put the dead in the holes and put stones on top of the holes with names cut into the stones, so that later, if you wanted to, you could go and stand by the stone and remember. The Penusari listened. The Penusari thought about it. The Penusari, 3 days later, dug a hole on a hillside above the spiral and put the body in the hole and put a stone on top, and one of them, a small one, a young one, had carved into the stone, in clumsy hand-cut English letters, because Penusari did not yet have a writing system of their own, the name they had given him in life, Harket, who was wrong, who was also one of us. Bastian stood at the burial. He did not know how to feel. He had killed the thing under the stone. He had also been the reason it now had a stone. The queen stood beside him. She did not speak. After a while she took his hand, his small 4-fingered hand, in her large 8-fingered one, and they stood together until the others had gone, and then they walked back down the hill slowly, because Bastian's side still pulled when he walked. In the third week, the news from Earth came in. It came in pieces, the way news always came in pieces. A scout ship had been sent in answer to his signal. It had arrived in the outer system, scanned, found no orbital defenses, sent its own signal home, and waited for orders. The orders, when they came, had been confused. The orders had been, hold position, do not engage, await diplomatic instruction. The diplomatic instruction had taken 9 more days to arrive, because the human government was, as governments always are, slower than the people it governs. When the diplomatic instruction did arrive, it was in the form of a single small ship, unarmed, carrying 3 women and a man. The man was a translator. He spoke 7 Earth languages and not a single word of Penusari, but he had been chosen because he was reportedly very patient. The 3 women were a doctor, a diplomat, and a general. The doctor was for Bastian. The diplomat was for the queen. The general was for the option no one wanted to name out loud, the option marked in the briefing folder with a small black square. In the event of bad faith, what to do? They landed in the meadow below the spiral on a cold, bright morning. Bastian walked down to meet them, on his own 2 legs, with a cane the Penusari had made him, because they did not have a word for cane but had figured out from context what one was for. The queen walked beside him. The doctor saw him first and ran the last 20 meters and threw her arms around him. And Bastian, who had not been held by another human in 23 days, held her back hard enough that they both made small surprised sounds. And the queen, watching, learned another thing about humans. "You're alive," the doctor said into his shoulder. "I'm alive." Everyone said you weren't, Command said. Command was wrong. Command is often wrong. The diplomat came up next, more carefully, with her hands folded in front of her in the way she had been trained. She looked at the queen. The queen looked at her. There was a pause that lasted perhaps 3 seconds, and that later the diplomat would describe in her memoir as the longest 3 seconds of her professional life. Then the queen extended one 8-fingered hand. The diplomat took it. They shook. It was clumsy. It worked. The general behind them did not put down her sidearm. The queen noticed. The queen did not comment. Bastian noticed the queen noticing. "It's all right," he said. "She'll put it down when she's ready. We're a slow species, lady. We're a slow species." The general put the sidearm down at the end of the day after dinner. She did it with a small, embarrassed motion, as if she had only just remembered she was wearing it. The queen, by that point, was teaching her how to eat the spiral fruit. The general was not very good at it. The juice ran down her chin. She laughed about it. It was the first time anyone in the human delegation had heard her laugh, and the diplomat would later say in her memoir that she wrote a short note to her husband that night, on a thin piece of paper that said only, "I think it is going to be all right." In the 4th week, Bastian began to teach the queen poker. This was not a sanctioned, diplomatic activity. This was a thing he did because he was tired of being a symbol, and because the queen, who had until recently been a part of a hive mind comprising 12 million separate beings, found the idea of a game in which information was deliberately hidden from other players to be the single most interesting thing she had ever encountered. She was terrible at it for the first 3 days. She told him every card she had. She could not understand why he kept winning. He explained bluffing. He had to explain it twice. On the 4th day she beat him 3 hands in a row and then sat back and made a sound he had come to recognize as Penusari laughter, the brief sharp cutoff, and she said, "Bastian Rogue, this is a terrible thing you have taught me. I am going to teach it to my whole world." "Please don't." I am going to teach my whole world to lie to each other in small fixed ways for small fixed stakes. Lady, I'm begging you." "It is too late. I have already decided." She did. 3 months later, there were poker nights in 7 of the spiral cities. 6 months later, there was a Penusari national tournament. A year later, a Penusari woman from a city far to the east, not Bastion City, won her way through to the championship final by bluffing her last opponent off a winning hand with what was widely agreed to be the most brazen all-in bet in the species' new and very short history of competitive lying. The trophy, by Bastion's suggestion, had been a Norwegian flask, a small one, empty, with the Penusari word for cold engraved on the side. He kept one for himself. He kept it on the table by his chair. He never filled it. He never drank from it. Sometimes, when the light was right, he would look at it and remember a woman on a ridge in a forest who had told him not to drink it warm. The war ended on a Tuesday. Not officially. Officially, it took another 16 months of negotiations and 3 changes of government on the human side, and a long, ugly internal struggle on the Penusari side that left 2 of their spiral cities partially abandoned, and 1 queen, not Bastion's queen, a different one, in a city far to the east, dead by her own hand, because she could not bear to remember being alone. But unofficially, the war ended on a Tuesday, the day the first Penusari ship docked at the human station above Penus 3, carrying not weapons but 2 crates of a fruit that grew in the spiral gardens, sweet and slightly bitter, which the Penusari delegation presented to the human commander, with the suggestion that it be tried with bread. The human commander tried it with bread. The human commander, a hard old woman named Petra Lind, who had buried 2 sons on alien worlds and who had been ready that morning to authorize an orbital bombardment of the Queen's spiral, sat in her office and ate alien fruit on human bread and cried, and the Penusari delegation did not know what to do with the crying, and the Queen, Bastion's queen, who had insisted on coming, sat next to Commander Lind and said, in her perfect mother's English, "It is all right. Where he comes from, this is also a thing they do." Bastion was not at that meeting. Bastion was on the balcony in his chair. Bastion was looking at the spiral city below him, and the city was looking back at him, with thousands of single Penusari eyes from thousands of single windows, and one of them, a small one, in a window very close, raised 1 hand with 8 fingers and waved. Bastion raised 1 hand with 4 fingers and waved back. He thought then about Tove. He thought about the flask. He thought about how she had said don't drink it warm, and how he had not drunk it at all, and how somewhere in the river below the cliff there was a Norwegian flask full of bad aquavit slowly working its way down to the sea, and how someday, maybe, a Penusari child would find it on a beach and bring it home and not know what it was, and a parent would tell them, "This is a thing from the people who came." This is what they drank. They drank it cold, because a woman named Tove told a man named Bastian not to drink it warm, and he listened, and that is how the world we live in began. He thought about Dennis and Urban. He thought about Eirik, the old enemy, the campaign that had made him. He understood now into the man who would walk into a queen's hall and shoot a would-be assassin without knowing or caring what species it was. He thought about his sister in Bergen with her hands flat on the table. He thought about his mother in her copperpot kitchen that had burned down before he turned 8. He sat on the balcony in his chair and he thought all of those things. And below him the city moved in its new and clumsy rhythm of many voices. And behind him, in the doorway, the queen stood watching him think. "Bastian Rogue," she said. "Yes, lady." "What are we going to do tomorrow?" He smiled. He was old suddenly, older than yesterday, older than 5 years ago, older than Eirik. "Lady," he said, "tomorrow we are going to wake up. We are going to put our clothes on. We are going to drink something hot. We are going to complain about the weather. And then we are going to figure out, the two of us, what comes next. That's the deal. That's how it works. One day at a time. Don't try to do it all at once. It'll kill you." She came and stood next to him. 8 fingers, 4 to a side, light on his shoulder. "All right," she said. "All right," he said. And the sun, which on Penis 3 was small and white and very far away, came up over the spiral, and the city woke, and somewhere down in the streets, a Penusari laughed and another one answered. And the answer was different from the first laugh, because there were 2 of them now, and there would be more tomorrow, and more after that. And that was the shape of what came next, on a planet that 5 days ago had no word for it. A man with 4 fingers had walked into a hall. He had not run. He had asked, while he was bleeding, if she was okay. She had been the queen of a hive that did not remember being many. What she did next, she sang. What she did next, she remembered. What she did next for him, and because of him, and the way no one on any world had expected, she gave her people back to themselves. And on a balcony, in a chair built for the wrong shape of body, a tired man from a small cold country on a small blue planet watched a world be born, and he laughed, and he cried a little, and he thought of a flask in a river, and he said, to no one in particular, in a language his grandmother had taught him, "Fin Tove, you should be here." The wind moved across the spiral. It carried faintly the smell of bread. He breathed it in. He stayed. That night in his room in the Queen's Tower, and they called it his room now, the way you start calling a room yours after enough nights. Bastian Rogue sat down at the small low table the Penusari had built for him, and he took out a piece of paper, real paper, brought up from the diplomatic ship at his own quiet request, and he took out a pen, and he began a letter. He wrote, "Dear Liv." He stopped. He had not written this letter in 5 years. He had received 23 letters from her in those 5 years, signed each year with her cat's name underneath her own, and he had answered exactly none of them, because every time he had sat down to write he had thought of the cat on the 7th floor, and the 7th floor on fire, and the lie he had told her in the stairwell, and his hand had refused. His hand did not refuse tonight. He wrote, "Dear Liv, I owe you a letter. I owe you 23 letters. I am sorry. I am going to try to write the first one now." He wrote, "I am on a planet you have not heard of yet. By the time you read this, you will have heard of it. Everyone will have. There is a woman here. She is not a woman exactly, but she is. There is someone here who saved my life and whose life I saved, and we have done a thing together that I do not yet know the size of. I think the size of it is large. I think the size of it might be the size of the war ending. I do not know if I am the right person to have done it. I do not think there is such a thing as the right person. There is only whoever is in the room." He wrote, "I am writing to tell you that your cat was on the 7th floor. I told you yes in the stairwell because I am a coward and because you were 6 and because I could not bear to be the one who said the word. I am sorry. I should have said it. You deserve to know. You knew anyway, I think. Children always know. I am sorry I made you carry it without it being said. I am saying it now. Your cat did not make it. He was a good cat. I am sorry. He wrote, there is a queen here. She has 8 fingers. She has been teaching me a song. I do not understand the words because there are no words, but I understand the shape, and the shape is the shape of being one of many. She thinks humans invented that shape. She is wrong. I think we are both still learning what the shape actually is. I think maybe nobody has ever known. I think maybe that is the point. He wrote, I have been thinking lately that I would like to come home, not forever, just for a visit, just long enough to sit with you at a table and drink something and ask you how school is. You are 11 now. I have missed 5 Christmases. I would like to not miss the next one. If your mother will have me, if you will have me, I would not blame either of you for saying no. He wrote, I am sending this with the diplomatic packet. It will reach you in about 3 weeks. You do not have to write back. You have written me 23 times. It is my turn. I will write more. I will write better. I will try. He wrote, your friend who was in the stairwell who is sorry, Bastian. He set the pen down. His hand was shaking a little. He folded the paper in 3, the way his mother had folded letters, and he put it in an envelope, and he wrote her name on the outside in the careful, old-fashioned hand he had been taught as a boy. Then he sat for a long time at the low table and watched the 2 moons of Penis 3 climb the sky. After a while there was a sound at the door. Not a knock. The Penusari did not yet have knocks. They were learning, but slowly, but a small clear 2-note hum that meant the same thing. Come in, he said. The queen came in. She had a cup in her hand. The cup contained the spiral fruit pressed into juice, which she had become slightly obsessed with, and which she had taken to bringing him in the evenings because she had observed that he slept better when she did. You are awake, she said. I was writing a letter. To whom? A girl I lied to a long time ago. She set the cup down on the table next to the envelope. She did not ask. She had learned, in the weeks since the song, that humans did not always want to be asked. Sometimes humans wanted only to be near. She sat down in the chair across from him, which was a chair her people had built for her body, and she folded her 2 many fingers in her lap, and she looked out the window at the moons with him. After a while she said, Are you going to send it? Yes. Good. Lady. Yes. Thank you for the cup. She made the cut-off laugh. Bastian Rogue, you saved my life. I bring you a cup of juice. We are not yet even. No, he said, I suppose we aren't. They sat together at the window. Below them in the spiral, a Penusari laughed and another one answered, and the city, the new, strange, clumsy city full of single voices, settled itself toward sleep. Somewhere in a city far to the east, a young Penusari was learning to write the letters of a language that had been a stranger's language a month ago and was now becoming theirs. Somewhere on a small blue planet across a great dark distance, a duty officer was about to open an envelope and not yet know that the envelope was about to change a child's life. Somewhere in a river on the side of a black glass cliff, a Norwegian flask was working its slow way down toward the sea. And on a balcony in a spiral tower, a man with 4 fingers and a queen with 8 watched 2 moons set, and neither of them spoke for a long time because they did not need to, because some silences are not the kind with teeth. Outside the wind moved. Inside the cup grew cold. He drank it anyway. He drank it cold, the way she had told him to.